Welcome, everyone. You can shut off your cameras if you like. I'm here to talk about records. I've decided that before I start talking about how to use genealogical records for Chinese genealogy specifically, I really need to talk about first, what am I talking about in terms of records? And then where do records come from? Where are they housed? Who generates records? And I will now share my website. So at this point, you should be seeing my browser. I'm using Google Chrome. Google seems to be the most up-to-date when it comes to just, I don't know, browsing. It just seems to be the friendliest. Okay, so before we can talk about records, let's talk about what we mean. Often when, as genealogists, we are looking for, my family, what you really, most new genealogists want a record, it's got a picture, it's got your ancestor's name on it, it's got their birth, their marriage, and their death, it's got everything. And okay, well, first of all, very few records exist that have all that, but except for death, there are records that are rich in detail. We're going to get into that later. But there are four main records that genealogists should get the most familiar with. And they are census records, birth, marriage, and death records. Now, having said that, I'm going to go to Library and Archives Canada and pull up the censuses. Now, Ancestry and Family Search have the censuses as well, but Library and Archives Canada has them for free. And so we start with free. Now, bearing in mind that census records are very dependent on the country that issues them. In America, you may have heard they are getting all excited because they have just released the 1950 census. And that is amazing because we Canadians have a privacy wall of 92 years. So the current most recent census is the 1926 Prairie Census. In order to use census records, you should have an idea of what periods of time the censuses cover. That's a really important one. So for example, if you're looking for a census record for your family in 1940 in Canada, you're not going to find it. Not for, well, the 1931 census will be released in 2023. And so it's going to be a while before we see the 41 census. Oh, sorry. I misspoke. Canada did not have a 1941 census due to World War I. World War II. Yeah. Okay, so that's census records. Now, when we are looking for birth, marriage, and death records, where do we find those? We often find them, well, in Canada, birth, marriage, and death records are health records. Health records are the purview of the province or the provincial jurisdiction. In British Columbia, we are very fortunate to have the BC Archives. The BC Archives kind of sets the expectation for genealogists for birth, marriage, and death records because it is so rich, and it is quite often the records are digitized. But I can tell you from my own research that quite often marginalized populations are not as fortunate with the digitized records. However, still, the BC Archives is a fabulous resource. Again, when we're looking at records and record sources, we really want to know what is available in what time period. It's not only where are the records, but when are the records? When? That's kind of a good way to think about it. So, for example, if we're looking for a birth record in British Columbia for a Chinese person in 1900, we are likely to find it here at the BC Museum. Now, there's an asterisk there, as there is with Chinese genealogy. A little known fact is that Chinese were not registered with the vital statistics in British Columbia until 1897. 1897. You'll notice that the birth records here are from 1854, and that means that about 40 years worth of records are original records, may or may not be here at the BC Archives. Every province is different. Every province had their exclusionary periods. What I am finding is that for Chinese who were born and died between 1872, when BC became a province, and 1897, when the legislation was amended, those people are very hard to find. Instead of civil registrations, you might need to be looking at church records instead. I know, church records, that's a whole different ballgame. But instead, Chinese had delayed registrations. Delayed registrations. So let's just, for fun, we're looking for birth records here. Let's include baptisms of anybody. I happen to be doing this family, so that's why I'm using Kamyao. And this is what a birth index looks like. Notice I mentioned earlier that for Asians, quite often there's no digital record. There will not probably be a digital record on this site. BC Archives, they're not going back to find other records as far as I know, not right now. However, records that are on the BC Archives are sometimes available in Family Search up until 1903 for birth records. So before we hop onto Family Search, let's talk about other common records. Other common records are things like city directories, voters lists. And at this point, I would like to show you a site that I use all the time. Oh, hang on. Okay. Finally. All right. Now, there. I do actually have all of these bookmarked. I am deliberately searching from Google to show you the process. Now, BC city directories. City directories are one of the more common ways to find people. You might not find their birth date, you might not find their marriage, or certainly not their death, but you might find their address. And geographic information is just as important as other information when we're trying to find our relations. Now, in BC, they have digitized city directories right up to 1955. That's pretty awesome. There is an asterisk. In the periods of time around about the 1900s, and prior, so let's just say 1915 and then backwards, Chinese people were often not listed in the names section, only in the business directory, and then only in their business name. And they were not listed with, how shall I put this, white people. Instead, Chinese were in a segregated section at the back. Let's see if I can give you an example of that in real time. We're going to Henderson's 1905. I'm going to go to Vancouver businesses. I'm going to go to, yeah, there it is. So this is Henderson's BC Gazetteer and Directory for 1905. And if I was looking for my family, my Yips and my Chews, and I went to C, and then I looked under Yip and Chew, CHU, I would not find them. And I might go away thinking, oh, I don't know why they're not in the directory, but I can't find them. They're not in the directory because the directory has a segregated section. Always look in city directories for a segregated section for Chinese. It's usually at the end of the city or the city listings or, whatever. So what I tend to do is I look for something like what I've just shown. I look for the entire index. I look for the end of it. And then I just find a page that's somewhere towards the end. And then I see if I can click through to that page. No. Okay, there. As you saw, it was a little bit hard to navigate to. But once you do get there, you realize, holy cow, Chinese are in the city directories. So here we start Chinese business firms. It starts with A. And goes through. I will make this larger so you can see it. And so this is really good and pertinent information, city directories. It's just for Chinese people, we have to have a different way of looking for them. Okay, so that's city directories. We've been through census records, which I've mentioned, birth, marriage, and death records, city directories. The next thing, let's talk about voters lists. So there are no voters lists for Chinese people because, of course, Chinese people couldn't vote until 1947, when the Dominion Elections Act was rewritten to re-include Chinese who had been able to vote prior to 1872 nationally and, various years within the provinces. And so when we are looking for voters lists, they are easier to find if you go to the search functions. Now I'm going to get to, I should probably look here now. So this is Ancestry. Ancestry is a content aggregator. It's a subscription base. It charges by month or by year, and it's a place to build trees and to find documents. The documents in an aggregator like Ancestry belong to Ancestry. This is why they charge the money, because they're constantly digitizing records and it costs a ton. I'm going to look under the search. Instead of all collections, I'm going to look for the card catalog. Finding the card catalog, it's probably my best tip for finding weird records, especially for Chinese people. You can search under only only Canadian records or all. And let's go voter. Voters lists. And these are census lists. Voters. Oh, there you are. There. So there we have census and voters lists. And there's Canada voters lists. Again, these are Library and Archives Canada files. And personally, I find you can use the search function. It may or may not give you good results because it's based on spelling. And you need to be able to spell the name. Ancestry's algorithms will probably be able to give you something similar, but not every voter's list is digitized perfectly. Let me say that again. Even though the voters list was there, it may not be digitized perfectly. What that means is that even if you used the voters list, your person still wouldn't come up because it hasn't been OCR'd. So I'm going to use 1949 because that is the first year that Chinese people got to be in a voter's list. And I have spent many, many, many hours going through voters lists, looking for Chinese people based on their address, because then you can find the people, their full names, their addresses, their occupations, and their places. Okay, so now we've gone through censuses, birth, marriage, death records, directories, voters lists. Another major record that Chinese genealogists always want to look for are jiapus. Where are our family trees and where are they digitized? If you're not sure what a jiapu is, it is a Chinese family tree. For this, Ancestry doesn't have them, but Family Search does. Now, Family Search is another content aggregator, except a big difference, it is not for profit. They don't charge. It's a huge wealth of records and all they need is your email address. And so if you don't have a Family Search account, I highly, highly recommend getting one. I have deliberately not signed into Family Search so that I can show you what the site looks like when you first land on it. There are some quick jump to records. And at the very top is the search function where you can look at records, images, trees, genealogies, the catalog, books. I mean, there are terabytes of information, billions and billions of records here, but let's just jump straight to records. We were looking for jiapus. Now, we are now in the Family Search page, and you can search by name. I mean, do it. Just check it off your list. Search by name, search by all the name variations that you have. But I'm going to show you the two other ways. Personally, I always use the collection because I know the names of the collections, but feel free to search by place. You mentioned that you wanted information from South Africa. That's where I would start right here. South Africa, and see what they have for records. Start exploring those records. In this case, we are looking for jiapu. I can't remember if they are under jiapu or what the name is. It's Chinese genealogies. Chinese genealogies. Nope. 1 second while I look for it. China. Oh, there you are. China. I just should have typed in China. So the China collection of genealogies is a collection of digitized jiapu. There is no search function. You have to browse it. If you have never been on Family Search before, I highly recommend reading the how to use this collection. You will save oodles of hours, hundreds of hours maybe, reading about the collection, because when we are looking for records, it isn't just that we are looking for records, we are also looking for record methodology. How were the records created? Why were the records created? What was the process under which the records were created? Because when we get a collection like this, we need to know all those things because we aren't able to use the name search function. So reading the Chinese collection, I will assume that you have read them all and you know. And now we're going to browse 13.2 million records. But first I'm going to sign in. Bear with me for a second here. All that we've done is we have gone to family search, we have gone to the collections, we've typed in China, find a collection, and now we're in the China collection of genealogies at family search. Again, this is free. All right, so the way it works is you need to know your Chinese name, which maybe people do. And if you do, awesome. I did not start, actually, I did. I was given that information, but many genealogists do not. And the second part is that you need your name in pinyin. All of these words are pinyin. This really throws Cantonese and descendants of family from Guangdong province, because Cantonese is the language in Guangdong province, and the names that we know and the ways that we spell them are usually derivations of Cantonese, not Mandarin. And so you need pinyin. Pinyin is Mandarin. Okay, so let's just say that you know it. You know what that is. What is my name in, actually, let's go with a really common one, Li. This is one of the most common names in Chinese. I'm just going to use search for Li. And this one, this particular character. So at this point, then, we've got Jayapu, and what the search engine is saying is, I have family trees from these 5 countries. Which one do you want? Let's say I want China, I want Guangdong province, and then it goes right into a district. Let's go with Guangzhou because we mentioned that this morning. And we've got this one. Let's make it a little bit smaller. So where are our records here? Oh, sorry. Silly. Let me click on it first. So what we're seeing is that there are 37 digitized pages for this particular Jayapu. If you haven't been to Family Search before, the navigation box here is 1 page, multiple pages. And so that's one place to find a Jayapu in online. Now, the other place is the Shanghai Library. And while I could show that to you, it's fairly involved. It uses Google Translate tools if you don't read Chinese. And it's kind of a rabbit hole, but I will tell you instead, there are 2 great, oh, actually 3. Now that I think about that, there are 3 great places to find Jayapu at the moment. My China Roots is at the 3rd. My China Roots is also doing what Family Search is doing, except they are a for-profit company. And they are digitizing Jayapus. So I typed in My China Roots. You can type that into your browser. And then under records at the top, under the dropdown, are family tree books. And in this case, we can search by surname, ancestral place, full title search, and last name. It really helps if you can type in your Chinese name, because your Chinese name is the only accurate name. But if you know your Chinese name, in which case I'm using the same surname of Li that we use for family search. Oh, well, that's interesting. Let's go. Let's try this. Okay, so there are records. Now, My China Roots, as I mentioned, is for profit. I do have a free account. I won't bother logging in. But if you're looking for Jayapu, Family Search, the Shanghai Library, and My China Roots. All right. One more. Chinese genealogists have that other people do not have is the immigration records that were aimed at only Chinese people in Canada and the United States. We are talking about the record collections that were generated by the Chinese Immigration Act, which is colloquially known as the Head Tax Act in Canada, and the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is actually the name of the American set of records. And for this, I'm going to start with Library and Archives Canada Chinese. We are looking for the immigrants from China, 1885 to 1949. Before I click this, I want to stress it's not just immigrants from China. It's also people who were born in Canada who happen to be Chinese, who were in Canada, not just from China. All right, so now we are at the Immigrants from China database. Okay, that's interesting. They've changed the site since last I saw. Advanced search, database, immigrants from China. All righty. Let's give it a shot. Advanced search. In the database, immigrants from China. Oh, they have changed it. Okay, 1885 to 1952. And let's go with Yip Sang, my great grandfather. And see what it comes up with. Yep. Huh. Interesting. They are getting better. All right. So this is one of the kinds of records generated by the Chinese Immigration Act. This is a CI9. A CI9, number 9, is actually in a re-entry visa document. And it is a great substitute for the Chinese genealogist in that it contains a wealth of biographical detail. It actually does have name. Let's see, we've got entry and exactly when and how, age, other identifying information in the form of other head tax numbers, height, description, photograph, witnesses, name in Chinese, re-entry date. And over here, 1914, that's the exit date and stamp. So a re-entry permit is not only an application to leave the country, but it's also after the trip when they came back. It will have both out migration and in migration. CI9s are some of the richest records available to Canadian Chinese right now. Due to many factors, political and otherwise, the government is putting more of a priority on digitizing and making available registers such as the CI9s, the General Register of Chinese Immigration, and other related records. So who provides records? When we are looking at records, we want to think about, it's not just archives and museums. We have aggregators such as Ancestry, which I showed earlier, and Family Search, which should be here, yes. We also have city archives. We have been to the provincial archives in the BC archives, but don't forget that there are city archives probably for your city, depending on immigration. For example, in Canada, important city archives to consider for Chinese genealogy are Halifax, that's Pier 21, the City of Vancouver Archives, the City of Richmond Archives, the City of New Westminster Archives, and in Montreal, Bank, BANQ, because this is where Chinese people were. You go where the Chinese were to find your records. Other archives that are important because of international migration patterns are archives such as Bristol, England. So in Bristol, they have done a lot of work in mainly British people who went to China and lived and worked, but there are other records for Chinese as well. And so when we're thinking about where our record sources, we have to think about history. Similarly, in the United States, we have Angel Island records. That's where Asians were processed mainly on the West Coast. Important other records are Hawaiian records, because that's where Chinese people often landed and were pre-authorized, if you want to call it that, from China through Honolulu and then on to the port cities, Vancouver, Victoria, New Westminster, Seattle, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And I've mentioned Pier 21, so I will end it there and I will stop recording and you can ask me any questions that you like.